So what about solo wargaming? That's what I wanted to approach in this vlog from the perspective of two primary ideas to solo wargame. And of course, then a third idea. So we're doing this wargaming thing, whatever the system is going to be. We're going to put systems aside for a moment. But for me, the idea of a wargame is two things. The first is we're answering that question, what if? We've got a scenario. We're setting things up. We've got our miniatures, we've got our terrain, and or if it's a hex map, whatever system it's going to be. We're answering the question, what would happen? When I play historicals, when I play my Romans, when I play Napoleonics, we recreate battles and we ask, what's going to happen? Even with Warhammer 40,000, right? A number of years ago, we recreated the Siege of Terra. We had all the traitor legions present. We had all the loyalists present. It was a massive, massive club game with almost 1,000 miniatures, well into that, and dozens of players. We don't know exactly what the siege was because it is made up, but based on the narrative and the novels and reading it, we created that to see, would Horus be successful? So the first is to answer this question, if you're in charge, if you're in command, if you're the tabletop general, can you make it happen? Can you pull it off? Second to that is creating this narrative, creating this moment where through the game, through the scenario, through the miniatures, we are stepping outside of day to day and imagining ourselves in this moment. When I play Battletech and the mechs meet, I like to imagine myself, what if I was piloting this Banshee and fighting this out? I mean, this is pretty crazy, right? To inject yourself in that and experience that perspective. There's something magical about the miniatures. So based on that, wargaming, of course, for myself also, it is a social event. I'm interacting with my fellow wargaming enthusiasts. I'm taking my player personality, we're taking your player personality, and we're trying to create something in that moment. If you solo wargame, you step out of that. So why would we solo wargame? Why not just work on painting your miniatures, right? Obviously, something has happened where you can't meet to wargame in the moment. Maybe the weather, maybe the season, maybe work, maybe school. Maybe you just started a new wargaming system and there's nowhere around to play it. So how do we explore it? What are some of the solo options and why would we solo? So the first thing, of course, is does a game solo by nature or based on the rules? Or is it something where you need two tabletop generals? An example, Ogre, a really kind of interesting one versus many type game. One player controls a cybernetic tank on an atomic wasteland, and the other player controls various units. And in Ogre, there is kind of an AI where the Ogre moves across the table and you're trying to blow up treads and blow up weapons and stop it. But likewise, a human player could control the Ogre. So inherently built in, the game is designed to solo, to play, or you could have two human players versus the Ogre. And then likewise, you could play one-on-one. Some games, some of the old school Hex games, Avalon Hill games, the nature of them, there were solo scenarios. And there are some war games that are written from that perspective. Those work out perfectly fine. So you would play those for the idea of immersing yourself in the narrative, right? We're going to try to check out the Battle of Britain, put myself in that narrative, but also to try out tactics. That's easy to solo. But then you have some war games that we tend to see where the miniature-based systems where you really need someone to command an army. Yes, I could make the moves for the other side, but I know what I'm going to do because I know what I'm going to do. What value does that have? And we'll explore that value in a moment. From that perspective, exploring it, now you need some sort of system to make it happen. You really do. And the system could be a bunch of random tables that you roll on to see what happens, attack, defend, move here, move there, do this, do that. It could be app-based. More and more we are seeing some app-based stuff, which I think that'll be a vlog for an interesting time. App-based war game support compared to board games that are hybrid-based. I personally don't like the hybrid-based board games, but I could totally see an app-based war game. Why is that? I don't know. That's interesting. But within that framework, is there some way to control it? At that point, you could. Yes, you absolutely could do some solo wargaming. It won't replace a human being. It won't replace kind of that wackiness. Like if we're playing a game together, I'm going on Tactica, trying to stick to the mission. And you're playing your mission, we're doing it. But if there's a chance for glory, I'm going to take it. Like if you're in a fortified position, I need to take that position. I need that glory. If I can pull off a charge, even in like sci-fi wargaming systems where it's like we don't do charges, we don't do hand-to-hand. We've got like psionic psyker magic and like laser beams and stuff like that. I'm like, we're doing the assault, man. We're going hand-to-hand, winner takes all. So I've caught many players by surprise because they're like, why would you do that? Why would you mass charge thousands and thousands of potential miniatures? Because there's tabletop glory for that. I say that in that when you play against a human being, we project our understanding of the game, but they have their own player personality. They do wacky stuff. They do unexpected stuff. They do smart stuff. They do stuff that we don't even see until it happens, and then you kind of get blown up. So from that perspective, like an AI solo, we're not quite there yet. Although maybe soon I'll be typing in and having AI play a game, and it'll just be pulling all the other YouTube channels out there and all the great stuff that they're doing and just condense it to AI to play against. But there's another reason to potentially solo, and I've done this. I've done this often, this idea of learning a system. So when I jumped into God Tier is a fantastic miniature-based game. I've got a couple of war bands. I've got the missions. I just sat down and played one side against the other. Yes, I made the decision. I made the decision for each side, but I was interested to get an understanding of how combos work, how buffs work, how the flow of the game works. Okay, this is the plot phase where we move, then flip them over. This is the clash phase where we alternate back and forth. So sometimes you might want to set up a system to understand the rules, but also just to see like how do certain combos work? How do things work out? How does positioning work out? To get an idea of those mechanics. So it's almost like a trainer type exercise. It's not the full immersion to the narrative, but I find that extremely valuable just in learning the phase of the game, because we've talked about this idea. I pushed this up to the Wargaming list on my channel here. The first thing that you do in any wargaming system, you have to understand the rules. I don't say memorize them, but you have to understand the rules enough that you understand the flow of the game. You understand, I do this, my opponent does this and that. So you get an idea of what you're capable of and what your opponent is capable of. So playing back and forth just with the rules will help you that. Part 2, once you understand the rules, then you start looking at individual units. How do the different armies work? How do the different factions work? What are some of the ideas? Then after that, you start developing your tactics. What do I want to do? Then you inject your player personality. This is the type of stuff I like to run. This is the type of tabletop glory that I like to achieve. This is the immortality that I'm looking for in the game. Those elements all start with figuring out the flow of the game. So soloing from that perspective is a possibility. Generally speaking, the wargaming experience, I would say, unless it is a dedicated solo system or from the ground up built with solo in. Again, Ogre is a great example. It's kind of a social thing. We want to play. So as soon as you move away from that, it's somewhat limited. I think it's more of a tactical exercise, or you start developing just some random charts and some random stuff to make it happen. So this way you can be surprised and you can react.